James, I saw you had a Mike Pence moment earlier.
You mean the fly on my head live on TV?
How that translates to the more respectful...
You were absolutely emotionless, though. It was as though that fly wasn't even bothering you.
Well, there's plenty of room for it up there. That has to be said. I'm James Matthews.
I'm Martha Kelner.
And it's Wednesday, the 7th of May, day 108 of Donald Trump's presidency. And Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, he says Canada's not for sale, but is Donald Trump listening?
And Trump's teased a big announcement for the end of the week. We'll get to that later as well.
Martha spent the morning down at the White House because Mark Carney, Canada's newly re-elected Prime Minister, of course, he'd made the short drive, but I suppose it might have felt long to him next door to visit the noisy neighbour, Donald Trump, in the White House.
It's amazing how much times have changed, isn't it? Because this would usually be a happy meeting with, the United States' staunchest ally. But the build-up to this felt ever so tense because of how much this relationship's deteriorated. I know you were in Canada last week for the election, which Mark Carney won largely based on his anti-Trump rhetoric, and the USA and Canada in this trade war for the last couple of months, and Trump's repeatedly claimed, continues to do so, that he wants to make Canada the 51st state of the US.
That's right, yeah. I mean, from my trip to Canada, I'm stuck, and it stays with me, Mayor Jim Diodati of Niagara Falls.
Mm-hmm.
We were chatting, and he says, you know what this is like? It's like a big brother with whom you're pals, and you're in his shade, and that's fine, and he kind of grabs the glory, but he's come in to the house and he's battered you.
Yeah.
And, in a way that you think, you know what, that's not going to happen again.
Yeah.
You've changed the rules. You've changed our relationship, and I'm going to stand up for myself. He says that's what this is like. And I think that's the kind of spirit that Carney came to the White House with. He came here as a fighter, not a lover.
Mark Carney got elected because he ran on this platform as being the guy who's going to stand up to Donald Trump. Did he do that, do you think?
I think he did. It's true to say that Trump didn't actually roll out the red carpet for him, because minutes before Carney arrived, in true Trump fashion, he was on Truth Social. He posted, "Why is America subsidizing Canada by $200 billion a year, in addition to giving them free military protection and many other things?" So that's before Carney's even in the door. I mean, it started respectfully enough, it must be said. He congratulated him on the election win, said it was probably the greatest political comeback in history, possibly as great as his own. But, listen to this, Martha. The key subject, clearly, it was, trade, but also sovereignty. Trump saying that he wants Canada to be the 51st state. He said that in the past. The question was, would he repeat that?
As a real estate developer, I'm a real estate developer at heart. When you get rid of that artificially drawn line, somebody drew that line many years ago with like a ruler, just a straight line right across the top of the country. When you look at that beautiful formation when it's together, I'm a very artistic person, but when I looked at that beauty, I said that's the way it was meant to be. But I do feel it's much better for Canada, but we're not going to be discussing that unless somebody wants to discuss it.
It was no Zelensky showdown. It's fair to say there was respect in the room. In fact, Trump said, we had a blow up with someone else. This is a friendlier discussion.
Apart from anything else, Carney had trouble getting a word in edgeways, didn't he? And you could tell that he wasn't happy. His body language kind of said it all, this clenched jaw, sideways glances at his team that was sat on the sofa nearby. And when Trump was saying never say never in regards to Canada becoming the 51st state, you could very clearly see Mark Carney mouthing never. I counted it maybe 5 or 6 times to the journalists while Trump was speaking. He kept putting his hand up to interrupt, but Trump would not let him. Eventually, he did manage to hit back with this, which was quite a wry comeback, I thought.
As you know from real estate, there are some places that are never for sale.
That's true.
We're sitting in one right now, Buckingham Palace that you visited as well.
That's true.
And having met with the owners of Canada over the course of the campaign last several months, it's not for sale, won't be for sale ever. But the opportunity is in the partnership.
Yeah, I think it's clear, Martha, that Trump's got a different relationship with Carney than the one he had with his predecessor, Justin Trudeau, who he clearly loathed. Carney has tempered the scornful rhetoric that Trump has aimed at Canada, and he does appear more respectful. I think it coincides, certainly on the subject of trade, with a more guarded tone from inside the White House on tariffs. The president, he might have celebrated tariff as the most beautiful word in the dictionary, but interestingly, that's not stopped him recently using uglier terms like transition, like recession, in the short term at least, prior to what he would have as the longer term economic improvement.
Trump was also pressed by journalists in that room on whether there's any deal on the horizon with China. We keep talking about the fact that these shipping containers are arriving on the west coast of America this week, half empty, because it's been 30 days since that trade war began. He came up with this hilarious line on China. He said, by not trading, we're losing nothing. So we're saving $1 trillion. That's a lot. It kind of felt like, as someone said on Twitter, that Trump's trade policy is, well, if I quit my job, I'll save on gas. There's not an awful lot of smarts to what he's saying there.
Yeah. He was asked about, trade deals, and clearly he's impatient with the journalist questions, which are fair. And he said, one day we're going to have hundreds of trade deals, and they might not even be signed. And I do wonder if that is a retreat of sorts, or just a shifting of the battleships by Donald Trump, because he doesn't see the news as good as he did, several months ago. And also, the other kind of material that he pulled out, I think, probably to undermine Carney and to diminish the importance of why Carney was there. Donald Trump started the meeting by putting him on hold. He said, he had breaking news. America had stopped bombing the Houthis. And of course, everybody gave a double take at that. And this was the top of this meeting, this high stakes meeting, all about Canada, trade, the future. And yet, he had a story to spin.
Yeah, Carney looked uncomfortable for much of the meeting. And I think a lot of that is because Donald Trump was trying to make him feel like the little guy in the room, like the little brother, as you said before.
Yeah. He did have his say in full, mind you. Mark Carney,
Yeah.
in the end, he held a news conference afterwards on the roof of the Canadian embassy. He described the meeting with Trump as the end of the beginning in redefining the relationship with the United States in mutual respect, clearly not an end in itself, far from it.
Now, Trump made a couple of big announcements today, or announcements that there will be announcements. We'll get on to that in a minute. But you mentioned there, James, that in that Oval Office meeting, Trump confirmed that the US will stop its bombing campaign against the Houthis in Yemen after almost 2 months, saying the rebels had told Washington they don't want to fight anymore.
Yeah, Martha, this is significant news. The US military has carried out more than 800 strikes against Houthi targets since Trump returned to the White House. That's an average of 50 a week. The Houthis, who are backed by Iran, they've been attacking Israel and targeting ships in the Red Sea, all in retaliation for the war in Gaza. The US, it's been bombing them in return. And this looks like a victory on the face of it for Donald Trump. In fact, that's exactly what it was called by his press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, on X. She said the world is a safer place with Trump as president. I suppose that's up for debate, but this ceasefire, it's only between the US and the Houthis. The rebel forces, they say they'll continue to fight to defend Gaza, but it's still a win to a degree for Donald Trump in a region that's proved difficult for him in the past few months.
Yeah, that US bombing campaign on Yemen, by far and away, Donald Trump's most active military engagement since he took over just over 4 months ago now. Trump was then teasing journalists in the Oval Office with another announcement, and he couldn't have gone harder on selling it, could he?
Yeah, that's right. Very, very big, he said. As big as it gets. Major announcement coming later this week, he said. Told journalists it would be so incredible and so positive.
But pointedly refusing to say what it was about or even in what area it concerned. He was pushed by journalists in the room. He said he'd make the announcement at the end of this week or the start of next week, which crucially is just before he leaves for his trip to the Middle East.
Yeah, it could be anything, I suppose. Trump has said before his team have been talking to many countries behind the scenes on trade, but he did rather imply it wasn't on that particular subject, saying, I'm not necessarily saying it's on trade. So all very
Cryptic.
cryptic, yeah. But, this man never knowingly underhyped. Another possibility is it could be something to do with the Abraham Accords. Remember, that's the agreement signed in Trump's first term that normalized diplomatic relations between Israel, the United Arab Emirates, and Bahrain. Trump's negotiator in chief, Steve Witkoff, he said on Monday that he expected an announcement on the expansion of the Accords, saying it could come very, very soon.
That trip that Donald Trump's taking to the Middle East next week could be full of news. Major talks which are being hosted by Saudi Arabia. The focus is peace in Ukraine, but the peace process in Gaza could also be up for discussion.
Yeah, I mean, Donald Trump is going to try and package as much as he can into a trip that spells success, albeit short of what he really wants, which is, I suppose, a meeting with Putin. That was kind of on the agenda, doesn't seem to be now, but meeting with Putin, peace deal on Ukraine, that would have been the big result.
Yeah.
Right now, he seems to be looking at results of sorts, but not the biggest prize.
Before we go, James, away from the Oval Office, we've had some news from the Supreme Court. On Tuesday afternoon, the Supreme Court justices ruling that the Trump administration can start enforcing a ban on transgender troops serving in the military. Trump signed an executive order bringing in the ban on his first day in office, but it had been challenged and blocked by lower courts before it reached the Supreme Court.
Yeah, this ruling means the administration can enforce the ban. A significant win for Trump after a number of setbacks in the courts lately, I suppose, especially on immigration policies.
Yeah, definitely a victory for the White House. According to officials in the Ministry of Defence, there are around 4,200 current service members. That's about 0.2% of the military who are transgender. And for them, this will mean the end of their careers and comes obviously against a broader attack from the Trump administration on transgender rights in the US.
Okay, that's it for today. But as always, we'd love to hear from you. Our email is trump100@sky.uk. So do please get in touch.
And remember, you can follow the podcast for free wherever you're listening, and you can watch us as well. Just search Trump 100 on YouTube or on the Sky News app.
But for now, we'll see you tomorrow for another day of Trump 100.
See you then.